Welcome, Shaun.
Thanks, Angela, and thanks, Dave, as well. I've got my special shirt on for you, especially because it's the first Actify Summit. So I've gone all kind of colourful and Hawaiian, especially based on your recent trip. So I just thought I'd go a bit colourful today. What I'm going to do is bring up my PowerPoint ready to go and get that in place first. There we go. And I'd just like to say welcome to everybody to the Actify C3 Summit. And what I'm going to take you through today is CAD visualization today and in the future as well. And what I want to just go through is a high-level view of how you can implement that CAD visualization to make your lives easier, and especially based on what Dave had to say as well. There's some really good content in here over the next couple of days, which will make you realize that digital transformation can be done quickly, easily, but more importantly, the processes, the workflows can be made smoother. You get things done right first time. You're working smarter and not harder. So let's jump straight in. Obviously, we've got the nice, pretty first slide. What I'd like to do as well is just make sure that you know who I am. So I'm the owner and lead consultant of CAD Consultants. We've been around since about the year 2000. I've published the blog, as Angela said, not just CAD. I've written for AuguWorld, Catalyst, Redshift. I work primarily in the AEC silo, architecture, engineering, and construction. And I create a lot of content for LinkedIn Learning around the products AutoCAD and Revit. I also work closely with Certiport on an educational side, AMD, the hardware manufacturer. And I've been speaking at Autodesk University for way too long, which is where I first met Angela all those years ago. And I've got, roughly speaking, 33 plus years of AutoCAD experience and 12 years of Revit experience. I'm not going to go into too much detail there because then I start showing my age. And I also crank out a little bit of music here and there. You might find me on iTunes, amongst other places. And the second album has been under construction for years. Basically, it's just one of those kind of bucket list things. But the first album came out in 2012. On a slightly humorous note, I got told a few years back at Autodesk University that I sound like the Geico Gecko. So all of you Americans out there will get that one with the adverts on TV. And the Autodesk University team class me as the Ricky Gervais stunt double most days when I'm over at AU when we're allowed to travel. So Actify C3. As Dave mentioned earlier, C3 is all about communicate, collaborate, and comprehend. And what I want to do is just take you through those three key points. So when you're communicating concepts, ideas, your design intent, your methodologies, how you interpret all of that, and more importantly, how you can then implement all of that throughout your organization. So when you want to collaborate, you've got a project. You want effective data design transfer. You want to make sure that information gets to the right people, the right silos, and so on. You want to be able to sit down with your clients and talk to the customer and talk about your designs and your data to get it right first time. That then gives you correct information, less errors, higher quality interactions, especially with manufacturing. The data then has a higher integrity, better quality, and as I mentioned, accuracy. The designs are then the same data and design always available throughout your enterprise as well, which means that within your silos, within your organization, there are reduced errors when you've got the interactions between those silos. So for example, I work in the architectural engineering construction industry. The silos that I would be dealing with would be the architect, structural engineer, the fabricator, the guy on site actually building the building, and so on. So you want to make sure that information is transferring quickly, easily, but more importantly, accurately. So when we think about comprehend is all about understanding. So we're grasping the design concepts and the methodology straight away. We're including everybody within our organization. We're democratizing the design across the whole enterprise. And comprise is the sum of all those component parts. You're putting them all together across the enterprise so everybody knows what's going on. You're then encompassing all of those silos like sales, marketing, supply, OEM, clients, stakeholders. One of the best things about something like Actify Spinfire is that ability to sit down with the client and go through the actual element that you're designing, whether that be an automotive part, whether that be, let's say, a 3D model of a building. What we're looking at is higher quality interaction, data integrity. So we're making sure that everything is accurate. That way, we've got a higher speed to market, lower costs. We're not worrying about mistakes. We're not worrying about errors. I want to take you to 1911, which is way back when, but it's where the phrase "a picture paints 1,000 words" came from. And it was a chap called Arthur Brisbane, and he was a newspaper editor. And his exact quote, I did look this up on Wikipedia, is "use a picture, it's worth 1,000 words." And I'm sure we've all heard that phrase before. But the scenario for Arthur was that he was in journalism and publicity, and he wanted to make sure that he could communicate a good story with images. I'm sure you've all seen in the media nowadays, it's all about the image. It's all about that particular photograph that they can talk about and make a story about. So imagine you've got a picture like that, which is a screenshot of a wheel rim in Spinfire. Imagine trying to describe that in words, all the surfaces, the rendering, even just the axes there, the X, Y, and Z axes there. Try to describe all of that in words and communicate it without that picture. So, as it says, and my theme as we go through will be, a picture does quite literally paint 1,000 words. Those pictures that we're looking at, they are an enterprise activity when we're working in CAD, BIM, which is building information modeling, design, floor plans, construction, manufacturing. Your sales team are looking for brochures and specifications. They're also going to have pictures, visualization. Servicing, OEM, manuals. One of the examples I always use there is the guy fixing the elevator. He doesn't have a great big 6-inch deep manual anymore. He has an iPad that he just flicks through and finds the appropriate page to fix the appropriate part on the elevator. Procurement as well. They're going to want to know quantity, cost, supply chain. All of that information can be stored in the one particular place and rolled out to all the different silos within your organization. So where does visualization come from? Well, I want to get across a really, really simple concept here. It's all about that picture that paints 1,000 words. Even when we lived in caves, we had cave paintings. The Egyptians had their hieroglyphics. And looking at B2, C2, and A2, Pythagoras had his theorem with the right-angled triangle. Leonardo da Vinci decided to sketch his concepts and visualize them so that people could see what that technology could do for them. The example there is a water wheel with a helix there, and it's basically taking the water up and down to different levels. So what about methods of visualization? How have they happened over the years? Well, I live in the UK, and I live not far away from this actual warehouse that you're seeing in the graphic right now. It's actually Siemens, and it's in the UK, and it's in a place called Peterborough. I don't know if the warehouse still exists, but basically those guys there are creating all those pictures so that you can visualize. The visualization is there. And that's going back to like the early 20th century, back when Arthur Brisbane coined the phrase, "a picture paints 1,000 words." Then we get to the era when I came into visualization. What we've got there is a typical 1980s, early 90s kind of CAD workstation. It's an old digital computer's Unix box, and it's even running, I couldn't even tell you what version of AutoCAD that is there on the screen, but it's running AutoCAD. But you can see that that is kind of dated now. So how's it changed? Well, we're now in the early 21st century, and we've got mobility now with our devices, we've got the internet. So we're not just working on the desktop anymore, we're working on laptops, smartphones, tablets. What we've got here is a really pretty picture of a hotel leisure complex. And I worked with this, it's a sample data set that I work with Autodesk Revit. And it's a 3D concept model of that particular building. So everything you see there, you can go into it in 3D, you can walk around the building and so on. But the whole idea is that it's CAD visualization. It's computer-aided design visualization. So what is CAD visualization? How does that work? 3D modeling, rendering, CAD visualization. They all kind of come together because you're utilizing those tools to create something for preliminary assessment. You're avoiding that rework. You're getting rid of the mistakes. You're reducing errors to, in essence, not only democratize that data to send it out, but to make sure that data has its integrity to go between those silos that I mentioned earlier. And as it says quite rightly there, unnecessary expenditure. The last thing you want to be doing is losing money off the bottom line by having to send 4 or 5 different versions of, say, that building to people to assess whether it's worth building or not. So what about CAD visualization now? What are we getting with CAD visualization? Well, we've got our 2D CAD like that. That's great. 2D CAD drawing, that can be printed to paper, sent out as a PDF. That's great, but errors can occur in that particular type of interaction. So this is where something like Actify Spinfire comes in. So there's our wheel rim again, but it's actually in the Spinfire reader. And as you can see there, every single surface is got a little tick next to it. I can go and look at every individual surface in Spinfire. I don't need to worry about which particular PDF has that surface on, for example. So what you're getting there is a tool, in this case, Actify Spinfire, that is democratizing that data. It's making sure that that data, that workflow, that process is available for everybody. So we talked about digital transformation earlier. Dave mentioned it, Angela mentioned it. So we're talking about something like our initial design. So we're looking at that on our monitors on our desk. We can then, utilizing tools such as, say, Spinfire, we can render, we can prototype, we can use all of our CAD tools there to create something, a concept design that is ready for rendering and prototyping. This can lead to things like non-destructive testing as well. There's lots of different analysis tools out there as well, which means that you can analyze it on a computer rather than have to manufacture a prototype and then perhaps like a mobile phone case, drop it on the ground to see whether it breaks. The best bit about that is with that particular cycle, we've got the ability with something like Spinfire to get that information out to the sales and procurement people. They can be then utilizing, let's say, a tablet. They can go and see the client and they can then get that sale and then the product is manufactured for the client. And that's where something like Spinfire comes in. What we've got there is a little package tray assembly, and you can see the data that can be sent out to everybody within the enterprise to interrogate and learn from that particular item. What I want to do now is give you a typical industry case. Now, Dave obviously mentioned the automotive industry, which is where a lot of the Actify tools are used. And what I want to jump into is customer specification design. Now, we've got a lovely screenshot there. You can see a nice chassis of a car with its wheels and so on. I'm not going to go into too much depth here. What I'm going to do is a very brief overview. But when you look at all the original equipment manufacturers that work in the automotive industry, they all use different tools. We have CATIA, we have NX, SolidWorks, Solid Edge, Autodesk Inventor. Look at all those different file formats that you're dealing with. As soon as you start translating those and shifting those around in the enterprise, you're starting to get that potential error gap there, where the translation of one file format to another could bring in a transferred error. Plus, there's many, many more file types, and too many, in fact. What we want to be able to see here is a basic model of something that we can translate to everybody within the enterprise. So how do we bring that design to all the stakeholders? We've got the design people, the CAD, the CAM, the 2D, the 3D, the renders, the prototypes. The sales team are going to need brochures, proof of concept, return on investment. Marketing are going to need stunning visuals and testimonials. Manufacturing are going to need measurement, precision, detailing, and as I mentioned earlier, accuracy. So how do we get all that to work together? Well, that's where Spinfire comes in. So Spinfire is a great example of that, where it has a unique licensing setup. It's based on the size of the organization, not the number of users. And one particular Actify employee summed it up for me recently. Everybody can have Spinfire. You can have a license running in the office. You can have a license running at home, which is especially topical at the moment with the pandemic and so on. But also you can run that in your browser. You can run it in a mobile browser, say on a tablet as well. And you've got the ability to see all of that information anywhere. You are democratizing that information throughout the organization. And as I stated earlier, that picture paints 1,000 words. Everybody can visualize that design. They can go and look at that design and see the relevant points that they need to look at. So you'll notice in the left-hand panel there on Spinfire, all the different components of that package tray assembly are there. You've got the brackets, the nut plates, the weld nuts. Everybody can go in and investigate that information and drill down. And that picture is already painting 1,000 words. It's removing that need for the 1,000 words with the one picture. Let's take a longer term view on that. Let's say that we move into a high level view within, let's say, the automotive industry. We've got the internet, we've got connectivity, we've got bandwidth and speed. It's just getting faster and faster all the time. That then gives us things like the cloud, which means we've got cloud silos, storage, and limitless server space. So all of our information can be stored in one location in the cloud for accessibility for everybody to get at it. Mobility, we've got mobile devices, document control, updates. All of this can be maintained using those mobile devices. But more importantly, we are collaborating. That's the important bit here. We're collaborating, and then, as the C3 ethos says, we are then comprehending those designs because we are collaborating. And things like projects can be managed that way. Stakeholders can see the designs they need to see. And more importantly, that really important one, it's the clients that pay your bills. So they can visualize what you are designing for them. Going back to Spinfire again here, we've got the ability to sit down with our client. We can work through the design checks and the improvements. We can work towards that best fit of the existing design. So I'm using that package tray assembly example again there in the Spinfire reader. You can tweak that design with the client at any time because they've got access to Spinfire, you've got access to Spinfire. You're anticipating any problems there as well. So the whole idea is you can translate those problems through Spinfire, solve them first, and then you've got more accurate data to deal with before you go to manufacture. It gives you a faster, better design workflow and a higher quality of manufacture because basically you're getting the right part first time, either to or from the supplier, and it's going to make any part of your organization better. Going back to that longer term view, something I thought about when I was asked to present at C3 was, what does the CEO need to see? They're not going to need to see all the nitty gritty detail. They're going to need to see a design that works for them. So you start at the top, you start with a pyramid and work your way down. You then purpose build your enterprise visualization, utilize the cloud, link specific data silos. So if sales needs to talk to engineering, you do that by way of a tool such as Spinfire. The mobility is there to allow you to do that. You might have the sales team in the field. They've got a smart device, say a tablet. They can jump into a browser, jump into Spinfire, and look at that information. This is cutting down on overheads as well, because the unique licensing model allows anybody to have Spinfire. So you're democratizing that design environment as well. And then those smart components, it allows you to apply Spinfire throughout the enterprise. So the smart components are already there, and you're utilizing that technology and mobility as well. Now, going back to what Dave said at the beginning in the introduction, obviously we've been through a fairly interesting experiment over the last sort of 12, 14 months. This work from home experiment where basically we've all been pretty much in a room at home working. So what does that mean for industry? Well, the adoption of accelerated digital transformation and visualization is here. And the pandemic has basically enforced that upon us. We didn't have a choice. But what's happened now is we've got thought processes that are giving us a really big change of corporate mindset. And what's happening is they're implementing new workflows and processes all the time. And the pandemic has kind of made us change our way of thinking in that regard. Now, you may or may not have heard of a company called ACCENTURE. They originally started out in the UK many years ago as Anderson Consulting. And one of the reports they've brought out recently is winning at tech adoption. And they've come up with some key words that I thought were really useful in this particular presentation. One of them is leapfroggers. The leapfroggers are increasing their tech adoption. They're utilizing technical advances to make their businesses better. The pandemic has compressed that digital transformation, as I mentioned. And what Accenture have come up with is 3 key areas. A lot of people are re-platforming to the cloud. They're reframing their mindsets in how they can work, especially with this hybrid work from home, work from a different location kind of environment. And they're reaching for broader business priorities. They want their silos to talk to each other. They want the technology to allow that interaction to happen. So let's take the Accenture example a little bit deeper. They're a world-class management consultancy at Accenture, and what they've done with the leapfroggers is they're the people that are mastering the system strengths and increasing innovation within their enterprise. But they've also come up with a fantastic term, which makes me think of Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know why, but laggards. It just sounds like something from a pirate book. And the laggards are the ones not adopting to this new technology, the new workflows and processes. And I just pulled out a little bit of data there in the table, just to give you an idea of how the leapfroggers and the laggards are comparing. And roughly speaking, the leapfroggers are 20% ahead of the laggards in adopting this new technology. So the whole idea of C3, this particular summit, is to allow you to see how to gain that 20% that's mentioned here in the ACCENTURE report. Obviously, you're going to improve your processes, the process improvement. What are you going to get? Well, in the past, there was always a need to do more with less. So what happened there, as Dave said, you had the licensing constraints. That was the thing that really held you back. There was a pressure to do things with not enough licenses. This sometimes led to a loss of quality because you couldn't do right on time design. So the idea is that Actify Spinfire is the better tool to do more with less. And what you're doing there is you're making sure that everybody's got Spinfire and you're increasing your output because everybody's got access to that particular tool. You're working smarter, not harder. You're not worried about the overheads of licensing anymore because everybody's got access to the particular interface that you need to see that design in the first instance. Digital transformation. Leading on from the process overview, you're obviously improving your processes, but what you want to do here is transform those processes to get things moving. Hence the term digital transformation. You are transforming to digital. How do you get started? Well, it's not hard. And the best bit about something like Spinfire is it's not expensive either. You have that unique licensing model, but you've got the accessibility. Like I said, you're democratizing the data. It's real time. It's immediate access. The data's there all the time. You're utilizing your existing data and designs because they're all sitting there just waiting to be used in your digitally transformed environment. It's easy to implement change. Everybody will see the change because you've all got access to those silos where the information is. You've got a better fit with less problems. There's less issues, less mistakes. So overall, digital transformation is simple, quick, and more importantly, cost effective. You are going to start making more money if you transform digitally. So how do you transform? You need to share your relevant data and designs. The data, if you're working with something like Spinfire, is non-editable. You're assuring your design integrity. You're not actually going into the model and changing aspects of the model. You are basically looking at a snapshot of that model, and what you're doing with that model is potentially marking up the model for changes to be made by the people that make the changes. What you need to do as well is become the CAD champion within your organization or assign the CAD champions within your organization. You'll find them, you'll know exactly who they are. One of the things that people call me is CAD Jedi. You look for those CAD Jedis in your organization. Find your CAD champions. They then become your leapfroggers. You move from being laggards to leapfroggers that way. You can then reassess and reframe your workflows and processes. Become those leapfroggers and not the laggards. Call to action from this particular presentation, and there's a few points here, but you need to talk to the CAD champions of your company. Make them your leapfroggers and show the organization what is actually possible. Any design engineer can roll this out in any enterprise. And you've got that unique Spinfire licensing model, which allows you to work to the size of your company, and you're not constrained by the number of licenses, or more importantly, the cost, the overheads of those licenses. And as I said, democratize data. Everybody can have access to the design data. So your key takeaways are knowledge. The expertise is already there. Get your CAD champions in place, the leapfroggers. The data is already there. You can collaborate and assist others in the organization and beyond. Democratize your data. Reuse your data in all those different company silos, sales, marketing, engineering. And as I said, CAD visualization, it's all about the pictures. They paint 1,000 words. So you need to work smarter and not harder. That's the whole idea of C3. You're going to work smarter and not harder.